Thanks so much for joining us today, you guys. I'm going to give it a few more minutes to pull everybody in from the waiting room. So we'll get started here in a minute or two. Thanks for joining us. We're going to give it about one more minute before we get started, but for those of you just getting in, good evening. We're excited that you're here. We'll start in about one more minute. Well, good evening. Let's go ahead and get started just to be cognizant of each of your time. I know that we've all been spending quite a bit of time on Zoom and on our screens lately, so we're going to try to keep things on time for you this evening. My name is Aspen Arnold, and I have the pleasure of serving as Vice Chair for the Dallas-Fort Worth Admissions Regional Network. And I just want to thank each of you guys for joining us this evening. I know, again, that we've been on screen quite a bit and that this is kind of a crazy year and a crazy time of the year with starting back to school. So thank you for taking the initiative to learn a little bit more about the College 101 process and affording college. Just a quick housekeeping note, I want to let you know that we are recording tonight's session. It will be posted on the Darn's YouTube page. So if you missed something that was talked about tonight or want to go back and reference it, it will be available to you. And I also want to encourage you to go ahead and utilize the Q&A function of Zoom. You'll see that Q&A function. We have some moderators on this panel today to answer your questions. This is a really safe space to answer or to ask any of the questions that you might have, no matter where you are in the college search process. So again, utilize that Q&A. If there are any questions that are kind of more broad for the group, we will address those live at the end of our presentation. I just wanted to go ahead and talk very quickly about DARN and the organization that is putting these events on. DARN, which stands for the Dallas-Fort Worth Admissions Regional Network, is an organization of regional admissions counselors that reside here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, away from our home campuses. So if you'll notice if you're on our website, there aren't any local institutions that are members of DARN, and this is reserved for us that live away from our home campuses. We have over 80 institutions that are members of DARN, and we have in-state and out-of-state institutions, public and private, liberal arts, and tier 1 research institutions. So you really are going to get quite a sampling of different perspectives when it comes to our member institutions. For us on the college side, DARN really serves as a professional development organization where we can serve one another as professionals. But for you as students, you're going to find that our admissions counselors, like the two of that we'll be presenting today, are a wealth of knowledge from the college admissions process as well as the college search process. You're really going to find that all of us are here to work together to make sure that you find the right fit institution. So that kind of brings me to how can DARN serve you? First of all, I want to encourage you all to check out our website, which is texasdarn.com. And on that website, you're going to find helpful resources such as documents that talk about about updated admissions policies based on coronavirus, as well as how to virtually visit each of our campuses, and the direct contact information for your local admissions counselors. You're also going to be able to sign up for the remaining virtual college events that we're hosting this week. So on your screen, you're going to see the upcoming events that we have both tomorrow and on Thursday. So we still have panels for you to participate in. And we're also going to have 2 nights of university spotlights where our institutions are going to take a few minutes just to introduce themselves to each of the schools. You can see what options are available for you. Again, there'll be separate institutions participating both tomorrow and on Thursday, so it might be worthwhile to check both nights out. But you can sign up for those events on our website. I know that we had quite a bit of interest in these events today and this week, but I also want to remind you that TACRA, which is a statewide organization of colleges, are putting on college fairs through Go to College Fair. So most of the institutions that are a part of DARN will be at those events too. So that's just another way to engage with us. So you can check out gotocollegefairs.com. And with that, I am going to go ahead and pass it off to Amy, who's going to start with the College 101 process.
All right, well, thank you so much, Aspen. My name is Amy Kobach, and I am the regional coordinator for the Dallas-Fort Worth area for Stephen F. Austin State University. And we are so excited to have you join us tonight. We'd love to share with you more information about the process for going to college, whether you are a senior this year and are currently applying to schools, or you're just getting started on the college process. Hopefully we can give you some great information and help you be a little bit more at ease in this process, especially for those of you that may be brand new to this. So as you can see on this first page, this is showing you the different universities that Aspen had talked about. We have quite a few different universities that are part of DARN, so you can kind of see the variety. We all work well together. As Aspen mentioned, we all live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So it's a personal contact that you can have to reach out to one of us should you have any questions as you are going through this process. And again, if you have any questions afterwards, you can always go back to the recording that Aspen mentioned as well. So definitely want to get started. We're going to be going through just the basic college admission 101. So this is just kind of what to expect, how to go about applying for colleges, and hopefully answer some questions that can make this a little bit easier for you. So the things that we're going to talk about is the application process itself. I'm going to briefly touch on just the scholarships, but Tony Chandler, after this portion, will also be going over more about financial aid and give you more insight about how to go about applying for financial aid and maybe some general questions that you have. And then we're also going to go over the decision and the next steps once you've been admitted to your school. So starting off with the college application process, the first thing you want to start doing, again, whether you are a senior this year or you could even be a freshman just starting, is you want to start researching schools. One thing that you can do is what you're doing right now, and that is to go to college fairs or presentations. So as right now, of course, with COVID, it's a little bit different for all of us. So we're doing a lot more stuff local or virtually, I should say. So attend these different things. Come to the other college university spotlight nights that we're having over the next 2 days and get more information on different colleges that are available. Sometimes you only hear about certain ones that maybe you're close to or that you've heard about through family or friends, but you might find that hidden gem mixed in there that you never even thought about before. So it's a great opportunity for you to actually go to these fairs, ask questions, and get more information. Other things you can do is once you find some, start researching their websites, finding out more about that school, things that may have interest to you. Get on their mailing list. Find out what's going to be happening over this year. Are you going to have any events? Are we having any presentations that can give you a little bit more insight into that college? And then, of course, social media. That is blowing up right now, and most colleges do have social media accounts, which you can get information from the school, also students, what's going on campus, what's campus life like, and it can give you a little bit more insight as well. So some things you might want to consider is location. You may have an idea of what you're comfortable with. Are you comfortable more with an urban setting for your college, or are you wanting to go a little bit more rural, maybe something you're not as familiar with, just to give it a little bit of variety. So take consideration about that and where that college is located. Are you interested in a public or private school? Just because a school is private does not mean that's something you can't go to. Often people think it's private, it's too expensive. Don't count them out, because sometimes they have a lot of opportunities to help you be able to get started in them. But then also take a look at the other colleges that you may not have thought about before. Average class size is something a lot of students are concerned about. Some students love the aspect of seeing a huge classroom with maybe 200 to 300 students. Others may frighten them. And so you may be more interested in a class size that's more what you're used to, maybe the 20 to 30 class size. So that may be something you want to ask. Total out-of-pocket cost. So as you're looking at the cost of the school, think about the financial aid, what you could be getting with grants or scholarships, and then what you would have to pay out of pocket at that time. Think about what you can afford. This is something that parents, we really definitely want you to have a conversation with your student about what is realistic. The worst thing that can happen is a student gets their hopes up of a school and then come to find out that is not a realistic goal for them. So, be open about that, have conversations together, and do your research together. And then how will all these things help you achieve your career goals? So is that school something that can benefit you for whatever career you want to get into? So those are just some certain factors to consider. As you're researching your majors and your career interests, there are some different things you can go to. Of course, there's different exploration tools. Consider what your strengths are. If you are not good in math, then engineering may not be a fit for you. If you are not good in science, maybe something in the medical field may not be the best option. So you really want to consider what are your strengths and things that you do well at, and also things that you're interested in, your hobbies. What's something that you are going to enjoy? You're going to have fun in your classes. You're going to enjoy learning more about. That certainly can lead to more success. Also, you want to consider, does the degree you're looking for or the career you're looking for require additional schooling? Does it need a master's degree or a doctorate degree to get where you want to go? Because that could play a factor as far as you looking into schools and what major you're looking into. One resource is a bigfuture.collegeboard.org. You can go onto that site and get more information about different careers, research it, find out what is needed, what you can do. You also can do certain things right now, maybe volunteering or going and talking to someone who works in that field and find out what a typical day is like. You may see something on television thinking it's great and come to find out it's not as exciting as it seems. So again, do your research as you're looking at different majors. So once you get started and once you are ready to get started on your application, there's some things that you want to look at. So for seniors, right now, pretty much most applications for colleges are open. So if you have not started your application process, I definitely recommend starting that now. For freshmen, sophomores, juniors, typically applications open up this summer before you start senior year. That time can vary, of course, per college, so you always want to reach out and find out when they start their applications. But some things that you want to look at when you look at the application timeline. So there's one thing that's called early decision. Typically, this is done a lot more with like the Ivy League schools, but some other schools may also have this. If you do an application that is considered an early decision, please note that is a binding contract, which means if you are accepted to that university, you are attending that university. And you will have to cancel all your other applications. So if that's something you want to look at, make sure it's a school that you definitely want to attend. There's also what's called an early action. This is not binding. Typically, you'll get your decision early on, but you still have typically until May to make that decision. Excuse me. There's also what's called a priority deadline. That's where some schools have a deadline, but it doesn't necessarily always mean that's when you have to have your application in. It could mean that this is when scholarships are going to be due, or there's other priorities that will meet that deadline. So again, you want to check out each university. Now, keep in mind, as I'm mentioning some of this, each school can be a little bit different. So when you're doing your research, you want to find out the specific information for that school, because what one school says, it may be different for another one. There's also the regular deadline, which is just a general deadline. Students may want, or the school may want you to have your application in by March. So if that's the case, you want to have that in by then. One thing with colleges, and you'll find out, the deadlines that they set are hard deadlines. If you do not meet that deadline, then you may not be going that year or that next year to that school. Okay. There's also what's called rolling admission. And rolling admissions is typically where we're accepting applications throughout the year. So you have quite a bit often to be applying, but also receiving an acceptance or denial. So as you're going through that, you may apply and get an answer within a few weeks, or you may wait a little bit. It just kind of depends. So they're going to be doing that throughout the year. So some application requirements, again, it can vary per school, and there's different types of applications. So there's what's called a common application, which is typically a national application. A lot of times that can be used by out-of-state schools. There's also university-specific applications, which each university would have their own application. Now, not all schools have that. So again, you want to check. There's also the Texas Common Application. There is Applied Texas, the Coalition Application, and then the Common Black College Application. So again, you want to find out from the schools you're interested in which application they use and if they have a preference. Some schools do not have a preference as long as you do one of their options. There's also an application fee. So most schools are also going to have some type of application fee. Now the cost on this can vary, but there's also options sometimes for what's called a fee waiver. The fee waiver could mean that you fill out a form from them. It could be an SAT or an ACT fee waiver, a NACAC fee waiver. So there's different types of fee waivers that you could qualify for, but again, you want to check with that for specific university. There's also, of course, the SAT or ACT scores. Now, we do know right now with COVID, it's been a little bit crazy trying to get those tests done. I know that they are still planning on doing some, so of course, keep that in mind. But you want to check with the school is if they require the test, do they super score? Now, if you're not familiar with what a super score is, it is taking different test scores and then taking each section from the test and finding the highest score for that particular section, and then the highest score for the next section on the variety of tests you take, and then combining them to make a super score. Now, again, some schools will do this, some will not. See, again, you can always check, but you also want to check with them right now is if they are test optional. Some schools right now, because of the COVID, are not requiring students to have testing to make a decision. So again, don't make an assumption. If one school is test optional, another school may not be. So you always want to double check on that. And then you want to make sure you get your transcripts in. So what you would need, of course, is your high school transcript. If you took dual credits, make sure we get those college transcripts as well. And if you've taken dual credit at more than one college, make sure you get all your different transcripts in. If you decide to do transfer and transfer into a school, but maybe you've gone to a few different colleges, make sure again that you get each college transcript sent to that school. You also want to check to see if letters of recommendation are required. Now, a lot of times they are going to be required, and you want to find out how many they may need. Some may require just one, some may require 3. So again, you want to check. You also want to ask whoever you're going to be having to do your recommendation letters, at least give them maybe a 2 to 3 week advance notice. I'd recommend erring on the side of about 3 weeks because they're going to have a lot of other students asking them for that question and that recommendation. So you want to make sure that they have enough time to give you a good recommendation. Don't ask them the night before because they may say no, or they may just throw something together, and that's not going to be in the best interest of you. Okay, you also want to ask someone of relevance. So maybe a counselor, one of your teachers, a coach, an employer, somebody that has seen what you do and how you do your work. Now we know parents love their kids, but a parent recommendation is generally not one you want to add. Okay, so again, you want to talk with the principal, a counselor, anybody like that can certainly give you a good recommendation. Your admissions essay. So there are some schools that do not require admissions essays. However, there are some that do. You want to make sure that that admission essay is what they are looking for. And what I mean by that is it, do they have certain questions that they're wanting you to answer? Or is it just an open essay about you? But you also want to make sure that you make it personal. Don't just say, this is what I like. Tell a little bit about you and how maybe a situation that you went through, something you overcame. Again, make sure it's what they're looking for and it's of relevance to their specific essay topic. But you do want to make sure that it is personal for you. That's the whole reason behind it. You also want to double check your essay. Have someone else review it with you or look over it, maybe a couple people. Make sure spelling is good. It's not a short, text kind of essay that you'd be texting your friends. But also make sure that it has the right school on there. That may sound funny, but trust me, this has happened where students will send an essay to University of Houston and it says the University of Texas Austin on the essay. 2 different schools. So again, make sure that that is correct. You also want to have a resume. So when you go into a review for applications, they're going to look at everything, especially holistic review, which I'm going to explain in just a moment. But a review, they're going to be looking at everything. So they want to see what you've done in class. They want to find out what extracurricular activities you've been involved in, awards you've accomplished. Maybe you've worked or done community service, or maybe you've started your own business. This is some place to brag about yourself. Take the time and really look over that and make sure you are including everything that you've been involved with through your high school career. And then any major specific requirements. Depending on your major, there may be additional applications that you have to complete. Just because you got into the school, there may be a separate application for that particular major. So you always want to check that. Is there an audition? Typically for some of the fine arts, like music or theater, a lot of times there is an audition for that. And then a portfolio. It could be maybe an art major, theater major, or like film. You may be required to submit a portfolio. So make sure that you do submit those as well. Again, if y'all have any questions, put it in the Q&A and we'll be answering those along with it. So the next bit is the admissions process. So there's a couple different things that we'll look at. So one of them is the assured or automatic admission. So as universities are looking at your application, they have what's called an assured or automatic process. That basically is if you meet those requirements for that school, then you will be accepted. That could be a GPA or a class rank and a test score. There's a different variety depending on the school. So if you meet that, you generally are going to be accepted. Then there's the holistic review, which I mentioned earlier. This is reviewed on a case-by-case basis, so an individual application. Schools will typically be looking at your transcript. They're going to look at test scores if required. They're going to look at all of that resume that I mentioned before, your essay, your letters of recommendation, all of that. So you want to make sure that you have completed everything that's required and sent in. Again, you also want to review it and make sure you're sending it all in correctly and it looks really neat. Okay, so that's kind of what a holistic review is. The time frame that you have to hear back can vary. Again, you've heard me say it over and over again. It depends. It depends on the school. So again, some schools you may hear back, by November. They may have a deadline to have everything in by then. If you're on a rolling admission school, it depends on when you get your application in. So it can vary, and you want to check with your specific representative for that school. They can give you a more realistic idea of when to be looking for that. Now, one suggestion that I've had, and I know many of us that work at schools have had these same suggestions, is we know that a lot of students usually apply to more than one school. Average is about, maybe 4 to 5. Some students have applied to as many as 10. So it can get confusing, especially with everybody having different rules and regulations and what's required. So a good idea is to make a spreadsheet. However you want to do that, whether it being a dry erase board, chalkboard, an Excel spreadsheet, whatever works best for you. And these are some things that we definitely suggest that you add to that spreadsheet, such as which school, what type of application they have, what are the deadlines, do they have a priority deadline for scholarships, financial aid, essay required, is a letter of recommendation required, and so forth. So you want to have that on there, and as you complete it, check it off. You do not want to miss deadlines. That is really, really important, and you definitely don't want to miss one simple piece of paperwork that's required. Okay. Another thought that I had a representative mention is, if you don't want to do a spreadsheet, you can get a manila folder and have a little filing drawer or something like that. Have each school you have on there, write down the information on that folder, and anytime you send them stuff, make a copy and put it in there. That way you know that has been submitted. Again, it's just what works best for you. Next thing I'm going to mention is, of course, scholarships and financial aid. Now, I'm not going to be reviewing really much of this, because Tony is going to be talking with you more about the financial aid process and how to go about doing that. So I'm just going to briefly touch on a couple things. One of them is scholarships, and there's different types of scholarships you want to look at. Start looking now. Talk to your counselor. If you're working, talk with your employer, check with your church, or maybe another organization that you're involved in, to see what scholarships are out there and what you can apply for. It's never a waste of time to apply for scholarships, and you want to make that part of your routine, because the more scholarships you apply to, the more opportunities you may have to receive some. So there's different types. There are some specific to the university. So you want to check with that school as far as what is maybe needed for those scholarships, what kind of application. Again, check with your local community about scholarships. There's national scholarships out there. There are so many that you can look into. And again, you can see a list of scholarships on our website under the College Search Series under texasdarn.com. Then, of course, as I mentioned with the application, make a spreadsheet for scholarships. So again, you're not missing out on anything that's required or deadlines that are needed. So the next step is, of course, after you've done all this major work and you've sent everything in and received your acceptance, next step is your decision and what happens next. So as you've received your applications, your acceptance letters, maybe you have been admitted to all the schools you applied for. Maybe it was half of those. Whatever it is, you have a decision to make. And that decision is, which school are you going to be attending? So one thing you can look at is take a look at everything, see which ones you're most interested in, and then start looking at the different options for them. Again, go back to what was important to you, what you want out of a college, but also look at things like total cost of attendance minus your award, aid award. So just because the school is more expensive does not mean it's out of the running. If you look at the award, the financial aid award that you've received, you may find that it is doable. So again, compare them. If you have questions, reach out to the financial aid office at that university and see if you're eligible for anything else. You also want to make your decision. Okay, that's usually a big step. It's sometimes a little bit scary. Is this the school I really want to go to? What do I need to do? But it's also an exciting, exciting time. So once you make your decision and you are aware of the deadlines, you want to reach out to those schools. Now, May 1st is what's called a National Decision Day. That's when most schools want to know your decision by. So it does not mean you have to make it today. Give it a little bit of time, except for those early decision ones. So you have a little bit of time to do all of that. But once you do, you want to inform the institution of your decision. So whichever school you're going to attend, let them know, hey, I'm coming, I'm excited, I am ready to start for the fall. But the other institutions that you've decided not to attend, let them know as well. Students sometimes think, I don't want to call them because they might be a little bit upset with me. Trust me, none of us will be upset. We want to do what's best for you. And if our school is not what's best for you, we want to make sure you're at the right school. So we will congratulate you and wish you the best. But let us know. That way we can mark that down. We're not calling you saying, you know, have you decided? Here's what you need to do next. And it can make your life a little bit less stressful. So let us know. You also want to check if there's an enrollment deposit required. Also, what about orientation? Again, most schools will have an orientation that's typically required. So you want to find out when that is, how you need to do that, how you sign up, everything about it. Make your housing arrangements. Does that school require you to live on campus for that first 2 years? And if so, how do I apply for housing? And then you'll also want to make sure you accept your financial aid and scholarships. Don't forget that. If you have not accepted those awards, you're not receiving them. So again, make sure that you've accepted those. And if you don't know how to do that, of course, reach out to your financial aid advisor. And then, of course, your meningitis vaccination. Make sure you get that in because that is a requirement. So just depending on the school itself, they'll let you know how to submit that document. As you're going to fairs, again, don't forget to ask questions. This is about you. There are no crazy questions. Trust us, we've heard it all. And if it's important to you, it's important to us. So make sure you ask those questions. Some ones you can ask her, what are some majors you have that are popular? Now don't count just because they don't say that's one of their popular majors and you're interested in it. They may still have it and it may still be an excellent program. So you always want to find out a little bit about that. What does your housing look like? How do I go about doing that? What do you pride yourself in? Maybe what are some traditions or things that I can get involved in? That's one thing we highly encourage is to get involved on your campus. It's going to make college life so much more enjoyable and so much more fun as you start meeting new friends. You also want to find out things if you're interested in research. What kind of research does your institution do? Or do you have any pre-professional programs? Again, if that's an interest of yours. Again, think about what's important to you in a college and ask those questions. Don't be afraid to ask and reach out to any one of us if you have questions. You want to remember college is what you make of it. One little life thing I like here is it says life in college is a journey, not a race. It's something you want to go by, you know, as slowly as you can, as far as making sure you're taking the right steps, you're not rushing through it. Because again, you don't want to miss anything, but you also don't want to miss some of the amazing experiences that you're going to have going to college. So again, if you have questions, reach out to us. This presentation, if there was anything you wanted to jot down and didn't get a chance to, will be on our website. I thank y'all again for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to Tony, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about the financial aid process and get some of those questions answered for you.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy, so much. And if y'all will bear with me, I am going to share my screen right now too. All right, very good. So I am going to talk to you all about mastering the money and give you a brief overview of the financial assistance process as you're looking at going to college. I have a very unique role at Bradley in that not only do I serve as your admission counselor, but I also am the financial assistance counselor for my incoming freshmen. So every year I have the pleasure and privilege of working with families, some of whom are very familiar with this process, have done it, been there, done it, whether it's for the parents or an older sibling. And some families that have never done this before, and they are completely at step one. And so I'm going to kind of take this from the step one perspective and let y'all know basically the types of aid that we're going to look at. Scholarships. I know we had some questions already in the Q&A about scholarships. The FAFSA, and calculating your out-of-pocket cost. First, let's talk about where does financial assistance come from? Well, definitely colleges and universities. We have money that we want to give our students, especially well-qualified students, to help them pay to be at our university. The federal and state governments definitely pitch in as well. And we'll talk some more about that when we get to the FAFSA. Student-focused organizations. One example that I always use is FFA, Future Farmers of America. FFA is notorious for, giving students scholarships that are looking at going on to study agriculturally related majors. And so think about those organizations that you're in, whether it's HOSA or FFA or robotics or something like that, to see if they offer some scholarships because you participated in that organization. Nonprofit organizations are great about offering scholarships as well. The Rotary, different chambers of commerce are great about that. So search around in your local community, you'd be surprised. And definitely businesses. I think particularly here in Texas, we're all very familiar with like Dr. Pepper and Kohl's and Coca-Cola Scholars and Dell Scholars and things like that. So there are so many outlets to help you find this money. It just takes a little work on your part to make it all come together. So when we're looking at a student's financial assistance award, here are some of the typical elements that you may come across. Loans, whether those are student loans, which are a Stafford loan, or a parent loan, which is usually a Parent Plus loan. Grants, free money, yay, we like free money. These can come from the federal government, the state government, or even the institution. Scholarships, and we just talked about that they're coming from every different direction, and work study employment. And we'll talk about how to achieve these different packages in just a second. We'll put it all together for you. So when you're looking at scholarships within the university, because that's probably where you are right now, is what do I need to do as I'm applying to colleges and universities to make sure that I'm eligible or considered for scholarships? First of all, schools, we are academic institutions that are very hard. And so we award scholarships generally because you're a good student. What the threshold is for that is different at every school. So I think as you're interacting with your admission counselor or you're on the website, it's very important that you look and see, is there a separate application? What is the threshold? What are the different levels of scholarships that I can get based on my academics? Some schools automatically consider students for scholarships just because you applied. Some schools, you have to complete a separate application. So be very aware of that. And sometimes that deadline for the scholarship application is actually before the school's admission deadline. So you definitely have to stay on your toes when it comes to these different deadlines. Of course, schools want students with all sorts of talents and gifts and things that they can bring to enrich our university. We all know about athletics. Hey, we live in Texas, we get it, right? So Division I and sometimes Division II athletes are fully or partially scholarshiped, but also things like choir, speech, theater, dance. These are all areas that, you know, they may have talent-based scholarships for you. Some schools will offer legacy or sibling scholarships. So if mom, dad, grandpa, grandma, brother, or sister went to that school, you may be eligible for a legacy scholarship or sibling scholarship. And also some schools, and you notice when Amy was talking about Darn, there are quite a few of us that represent out-of-state schools. And sometimes they are here in Dallas-Fort Worth because they want to attract students from this area, and they may have scholarships to offer just because of the geographic location where you're coming from. So definitely good questions to ask. We never get offended, like, you know, do you have a scholarship for this, or what kind of scholarship can I get because of that? You know, ask the questions. They're worthy questions, so definitely ask them. External scholarships. So I mentioned about nonprofits and student organizations and companies, and you're like, wow, that is kind of overwhelming to sit and try to figure out where all these scholarships are. How do I apply for them? What are they? What do they need from me? So here are some of my favorite external scholarship clearinghouses, basically. FastWeb, Going Merry, College Board now has one as well. These are basically clearinghouses. So all these scholarships are listed in one place. You can read the criteria. You can read, and they usually will link on to the application. Those deadlines kind of are scattered all throughout the year. So if you wake up in March and say, wow, I need to apply for some external scholarships, you may have missed out on some really great ones. I will tell you, and as I told my own children, applying for external scholarships has now become your part-time job. So, you know, definitely every week, get on those, sign up for yet another email, yes. But the great thing about like FastWeb is that they don't sell your information, and they only email you when a scholarship pops up that you feel like you meet the criteria for that. Also, check with your high school counseling office. I know a lot of our high school counselors in the Dallas-Fort Worth area do an amazing job keeping a list of scholarships running, whether it's on their website or it's in Naviance or whatever format they use. So don't forget to go on there and check, but definitely tell your counselor, hey, if you come across, you know, a scholarship, keep me in mind. I'm definitely looking for external scholarships. No shame in that. They'll definitely want to know that. So let's talk about the other pieces besides scholarships, and that comes from filing the FAFSA. The FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. First word in there, free. The FAFSA is a free application. Same thing with scholarships. Don't ever pay people to help you find money. Kind of counterintuitive, right? All of these tools that we're telling you about and our expertise in Darn, that's free. So take advantage of it, but you'll get, you know, companies a little shady, you know, saying, hey, if you pay us this, we guarantee you that much in scholarships. You don't have to do that. Just use the tools that we have. Same thing with the FAFSA. You don't need someone to help you file the FAFSA or pay them to do it for you. So you're going to file your FAFSA, you hit submit. you're going to look for information on your expected family contribution, and I'll go into that in just a minute. And then the university sends you award information and how they've put together all those elements that we talked about at the beginning: loans, grants, scholarships, work study, to give you a complete financial picture. So the FAFSA opens on October 1st, but the thing you can do right now, should you choose to, is go on and register for your FSA ID. Your FSA ID is basically your electronic signature that verifies that you're signing this document, right? The FSA ID travels with the person, not just the student. So if mom and dad or whomever have done this for your older brother or older sister or for themselves, they do not need a new FSA ID in order to sign your FAFSA, but you do. So unless you filed a FAFSA before, you need a new FSA ID. My best tips, definitely don't use your high school email. And Amy may have mentioned this in the presentation. As a general rule, I encourage students not to use their high school issued email address for anything college related, and here's why. Some schools, the day after you graduate, they wipe your account. Some will let you have it forever as long as you want to have it, which is great. But a lot of schools just wipe that email out the minute you graduate. And so all of that information just went away. So definitely, you know, I would encourage you to just get a Gmail account that is just for your college and FAFSA stuff. And use a username and a password that you can remember for 4 years. I know you're not supposed to write passwords down and stuff like that. I've written my child's, you know, password for FAFSA, my FSA ID down in code someplace so I can remember it, because you only do this once a year, and, you know, for heaven's sake, who's going to remember it a year from now? So just keep that in mind. Okay, so who can file a FAFSA? That was a good question. So you have to be expecting to receive a high school diploma or the equivalent. So a GED would generally be an acknowledgement of an equivalent to a high school diploma. You have to be a US citizen or an eligible non-citizen, have a valid social security number. You have to be accepted into an eligible program or university. And male students must register with a selected service, which means, and I know that's kind of old school, but you know, if you just Google, guys, selective service when you turn 18, but every year I have a big group of boys that I have to go back and tell them to register with a selective service, because we can't complete their FAFSA until they do that. So. All right, so here we go. FAFSA in a nutshell. It's free. It opens October 1st. And the interesting thing about the FAFSA is that it utilizes information from 2 years prior to the fall that you start school. So theoretically, if you're a senior this year, you're starting in the fall of 2021. We're going to hop backwards in our magical FAFSA time machine and go back to 2019. And that is the information that you are going to use and we are going to review as part of your FAFSA. And if you go to studentaid.gov, you'll see new to the FAFSA process. You start there, super easy. If you're a returning user, you need to correct some info or add a new school or view your SARS, your student aid report, you can log back into the same place. So bookmark studentaid.gov on your computer. I promise you, you will use it probably a lot in the coming months. Okay, so what do I need to complete the FAFSA? Like we talked about, your social security number for you, student, and your parents. If they don't already have an FSA ID, that is the part of the FSA ID, is having that social security number. correct birth dates, correct mailing address, correct marital status, and correct number of dependents in your household. Okay, I talked briefly about an expected family contribution when I was telling y'all about the timeline of what happens with your FAFSA. So an expected family contribution is the calculation that the Department of Education, so when you hit send on your FAFSA, it goes off to the Department of Education. It does not stop at the university first. It goes to the Department of Education, and they do a calculation, a very complicated calculation of the family's ability to pay for educational expenses. So part of the FAFSA is going to ask, about income, parental income, additional income, student contribution, and that is how, number of people in the family, that is how the expected family contribution is calculated. So we use an expected family contribution as kind of a guidepost for us. Students with the lowest EFC may be eligible for things that are reserved particularly for students of highest need, like a Pell Grant. Pell Grant is a very common federal grant. It's generally reserved for students of highest need, albeit those with the lowest expected family contribution. It stays, your EFC is the same regardless of how much the school costs. It is not the amount you pay. It is not the amount of aid you'll receive, and it can change from year to year, which is why the FAFSA has to be redone every year. Remember, I said you've got to remember this for 4 years, but you're only doing it once a year. That's because every year around October 1st, you're going to want to redo that FAFSA because things change. Income goes up, down. More students in the family, maybe in college, that will affect an EFC. So for accuracy's sake, you redo it every year. Okay. The fun part, the common FAFSA mistakes. Definitely not hitting submit. Every year, God love them, I have a lot of students who are so diligent and they're trying to get all this stuff done. And they're like, I swear I sent my FAFSA to Bradley. And I'm like, well, let's go into your FAFSA account. Oh, no, I didn't. Okay, so you got to hit the submit button. That's a big deal. Incorrect social security numbers, birthdays, or emails. You definitely want to check those numbers. They get transposed, and if a social security number doesn't match in our system, it's not the end of the world, but it's definitely, another step that we have to go back and get that corrected so we can match the student to the FAFSA. So social security number, birthday definitely helps us do that. Definitely add schools and take schools off your FAFSA as you need to. As you're narrowing down that list or you get admitted to another school, go into that FAFSA and add that school onto your FAFSA to receive your report. We cannot calculate a financial award for a student who has not been admitted. Some schools, and we certainly have estimators and things like that, but for the most part, schools cannot calculate a financial assistance award fully for a student who has not been admitted. Want to make sure we've got the correct tax information, and definitely you need to make sure that everybody who is supposed to sign the FAFSA signs the FAFSA. I think in general, most schools are great about letting you know, hey, there's an error to your FAFSA. But again, that is only as good as you checking your email. So, FAFSA time is definitely the time to keep checking your email. If time has gone by and you're like, gosh, why haven't I heard from XYZ University about my financial assistance award? that's the time to pick up the phone or send an email and say, hey, is something wrong? I haven't heard anything. So definitely it's okay to ask those questions, but don't sit for 3 or 4 months wondering why you haven't heard anything, because I bet there is some kind of error on your FAFSA that just needs a simple correction so we can go ahead and process that award. Okay, so the IRS data retrieval tool. Remember I told you that we're going in our time machine back 2 years to 2019, theoretically, for my seniors, and looking at what your family's financial situation was at that point. One really easy way to do it, because theoretically, whoever information you're using has filed their taxes by now, hopefully, and for 2019. And so the IRS data retrieval tool basically allows FAFSA to access the IRS database and pull that information straight in and auto-populate your FAFSA. So what is so great about doing this? Well, again, and I actually had this happen where I had a student that put, their family income was $1 million when their family income was actually like $100,000. Big difference. So when you're using that data retrieval tool, the numbers are coming straight from the IRS. It's correct. As long as it matches with those social security numbers, the data retrieval tool really can save you some time and trouble on down the line. And you'll see it when you come across, when you're working in your FAFSA, it'll ask you, do you want to utilize this tool? I personally recommend that you do, but it's totally up to you. Okay, so let's break down again those elements of a financial assistance award. Loans. Almost every student I work with from year to year is offered some level of student loans, whether they are subsidized or unsubsidized or a combination thereof. Student loans are a very common element of a financial assistance award. Parent Plus loans can also be obtained. Generally, schools will send information about a Parent Plus loan, but it generally is not calculated into the financial assistance award as the student will see it initially. That's something that we take on a little while later. But sometimes I'll have families say, well, we didn't get any aid, all we got were loans. But technically, student loans are a part of federal aid, and so it definitely qualifies as part of a financial assistance award. But everybody likes grants, right? Grants are free money. Yay for free money. And I mentioned a Pell Grant. Sorry, my presentation talks about a MAP grant, which is for Illinois residents only. My school's located in Illinois, but there are Texas grants and things like that that the state of Texas awards to its students. And then institutional grants. So particularly you'll see this at private schools, although some state schools will award institutional grants. Sometimes we see a family that is not high need, but they're not no need. They're kind of in that middle of moderate need, and we can supplement the student loans and the scholarships and whatever else with, an institutional grant or a Bradley grant. And so those elements can all come together. And of course, there's federal work study. Now, again, federal work study as a general rule is reserved for students with low EFCs, those students of highest need. But everybody who is eligible to work in the United States can work on a college campus. I was not under federal work study, but I did work on campus for 3 of my 4 years in college, and same pay rate, same job, had someone sitting right next to me that was on federal work study, but guess what? No one knows, no one cares. It's just do your job and make your money. Generally, when you have a campus job, those are just like any other job that you would have. The money goes right in your pocket and you can use it as you see fit. Some students squirrel it away to buy books for the next semester or help with their bill for the next semester. Some students, use it on Starbucks and Jimmy John's and everything in between. It's totally up to you. But generally those campus jobs are money in your pocket, direct deposit, just like if you worked somewhere off campus. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some frequently asked questions. Do you have to file FAFSA if you don't think you'll get aid? The general recommendation here is yes. You don't have to, no one's going to make you, but we certainly encourage you to do it. Sometimes schools will say to be eligible for scholarships, we have to have your FAFSA on file. And so definitely that's something that you need to find out about. But I always tell my families, just go ahead and file it. You may be surprised, but also heaven forbid something were to happen, someone were to lose their job or something like that, having that FAFSA on file and then go and being able to look at extenuating circumstances can be very helpful. What if my income in 2019 looks very different than it does today? Will a university take that into account? Absolutely. We want to work with families. Most schools have a special circumstance form or some process of financial aid appeal that you can go back and say, well, yeah, we know in 2019, mom and dad were employed and they were doing this and we got that. But in 2020, 2021, things not looking the same. So medical expenses or job loss or something like that are things that most schools will take into account. Again, it doesn't hurt to ask, always ask. My parents are divorced. Whose information do I use to file the FAFSA? So the government is very clear on this, that you need to submit the parent who has provided the most financial support in the last 12 months. So if you live with mom, mom's making your car payment, mom feeds you, mom, buys your clothes and whatever, it's probably mom. And sometimes people are like, well, can I use a parent who makes less money? The government says, please don't, okay? Use the person who provided the most financial support over the last 12 months. All right, so we've got all these elements and how it's all coming together. And I want you to really understand out-of-pocket cost of attendance information, because these are 3 different schools. And this is actually one of my students from this last year, one of my Texas students' financial assistance awards. And we give them this spreadsheet so they can look at it like apples to apples and do a really thorough cost comparison. So you have a private school, an in-state school, and an out-of-state public. And if you just stopped at the total cost, or what I call the sticker price of the school, you would look and go, wow, $50,000. I think we're scratching that school off our list. But just like Amy said, you have to let the private schools do what they do best, which is help families, and the state schools do it too. Everybody's got their level of aid, and you have to let the money process kind of work out. It is always the last thing that falls into place. But you may be amazed at what the outcome is. So you're sitting here looking at these 3 different schools, the private school, the in-state, the out-of-state public. And then we look at grants and scholarships, very different. Student loans, always going to be the same because the federal government caps those, and what they are right now is $5,500 for a freshman this year. But the total, percentage of what that's taking off your bill is very different from school to school. So look at that remaining cost. It's very different. And, the schools that, seemed like they were kind of in the middle actually ended up being the most expensive. The school that looked like it was the most expensive has now moved to the middle. And I will tell you, from a private school perspective, and I come from a state school background, we want to have those conversations with people. If this were my student, and it is, and I'm looking at this, some people are like, well, I'm fine paying, $2,000 more, but I don't ever want to lose a student over $2,000. So again, ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. Is there anything more that can be done? The worst we're going to say is, no, that's the best we can do. But wouldn't you like to know that you did all you could, especially if it's your dream school, it's the school you want to be at. So ask those questions, do that apples to apples comparison of out-of-pocket expense. You may just really be amazed, but don't just stop at the sticker price, because you may be missing out on some really amazing schools. Okay, definitely, look at the value. Sorry, my timer is going off. There we go. Stop. So look at the value, not just the numbers. A couple of years ago, I had a young woman say, well, I'm just going to go wherever it's cheapest. And that's one way to do it. I don't necessarily, I'm not paying the bill for her, but definitely you also have to look at the value of that education and the outcomes of that education, and ask yourself, hey, is it worth paying $2,000 more to get that education than the other education? That's your call. That is a conversation that you and your family need to have. Okay, so this is my contact information. You guys are always welcome to contact me if I can clarify anything or explain further. I'm always happy to do that. And I am going to, take a picture of my contact information real fast, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen. There we go. All right. So I think we were doing pretty okay with the Q&A. Let me see. I'll go through here and could you see the external scholarship link again? Yeah, absolutely. Let me go back to that. And I'm sorry, I have to do this old school and just go back. It's gonna kind of give you a head rush here because I don't remember what slide number that is. Just so y'all know about the selective service, a student just needs to register for the selective service as soon as they turn 18. So if they turn 18 on December 1st, go ahead and do that. Sorry, you guys, I just don't remember what slide number that was. There it is. Okay. So here is the external scholarship websites. I hope that helps you. Okay, everybody grab that. Okay, fabulous. Any other questions that we can tackle in the Q&A? Let me see, there's one more related. Is there financial support for divorced parents? Different ways that it's not clear cut. Okay, at that point, y'all could just sit down, I guess, and kind of calculate out who is giving more aid in a divorced parent situation. I mean, I've had parents that it was literally kind of 50-50. The student lived with one parent half the time, the other parent half the time. One parent paid health insurance, but the other made the car payment, and you get the idea. So they just basically said, well, 1 year we'll use mom's info and 1 year we'll use dad's info. And that worked for them. So I think every family in that situation just has to find the way that works for them, and probably just sitting down and hashing out the numbers is the way to do it. You do not have to be 18 to file your FAFSA. You do have to be 18 to register with the Selective Service if you're a male. So let me just be clear about that. The FAFSA opens on October 1st. It doesn't matter if you're 16, 17, 19, 22, file your FAFSA. But if you are 18 or will turn 18, and you're a male, just know that you need to register with the Selective Service. The Hazelwood Act is for dependents of military in the state of Texas, which works at Texas schools. And I would tell you that every school has a VA coordinator in their office, and I would just ask to speak with the VA coordinator or someone in the bursar's office who handles Hazelwood. There's a little bit of paperwork, as always, that goes into that. So definitely you want to tackle that and be just cognizant of what you need to do. How many years of tax is needed? Just 1 year for one FAFSA. So they're just like, if you go on October 1st of 2020, the FAFSA is going to be working off of your 2019 income information. And so just 1 year, and then the next year it'll be 2020s, and then the next year it'll be 2021. So we call it prior, but just think about hopping backwards 2 years from the fall of college, and that's what the information we're going to be looking at. I'm not sure what you mean about divorced parents rule work the same as a single parent. If it's a single parent and that parent is the only person giving support to that student and the only parent contributing, then you would just use that parent's picture, okay, their income information. So if your parents are married and they're filing jointly, that is a both parent situation, okay? So you're only using one parent if the parents are divorced, no longer living together. You are working and you have to choose one parent or the other's FAFSA information. That's where the 50% or more rule comes in. But if your parents are married, you're using both parents' information, just like they filed on their FAFSA, because they're probably filing jointly. So that's where that information would come from. Green cards, I will tell y'all that if you're an international student, you really need to speak with the international student liaison at the universities because there's so many different visas and things that a student could be on and different statuses that parents may have as they're working here in the United States. So I'm going to defer to someone with better knowledge of that than I have, but every university in the United States has someone that works with international students. So hopefully that helps you. Amy, do you want to jump back on? Is there any parting thoughts that you may have?
I apologize. I got kicked out for a little bit, so I'm just now getting back.
Low technology. Okay.
I know. I don't have any really parting thoughts. I'm sure y'all probably answered a lot of questions, and I know everyone here probably is overloaded with information, but hopefully we gave you some great information just to kind of help you through the process. If there are any additional questions, I'm more than happy to help answer them.
All right. Well, with that being said, I want to make sure we get all these done in the Q&A. Yeah, thank you all so much for coming tonight. I'm trying to talk and type at the same time. I'm just not that coordinated. We really appreciate it. We hope that you'll check out the workshops and the college spotlights that are going on the rest of the week. Most of all, just like Amy said, enjoy this process. Yes, there will be stress, but there's so much joy in it. And I hope that your college's experience is as wonderful as mine was. That's the best wish I could give you. So thank you all so much for coming tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much to everyone who has attended. I think we got most of the questions answered. In the event that we didn't, you're welcome to reach out to your local representative. Anyone that is a member of DARN will have a regional member, or will have a regional representative based here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so if you go to texasdarn.com, you'll see a complete list of all of our contact information for those regional representatives. You'll also see some other resources, and we have a COVID resources guide. So as universities make changes, they update their policies, all of those are going to be listed on that website as well. So again, if you just go to texasdarn.com, then you'll be able to pull all of that information. We will have a recording of this available. We'll hope to get that up on the DARN YouTube channel here before too long. That's also hyperlinked on texasdarn.com. And thank you guys so much to everyone who attended, and you'll have a good evening.